The Xbox controller is holding back the entire gaming industry. That was the first line in my most viewed YouTube short on my channel. Obviously, this is a pretty strong statement, and while I do stand behind it, at the end of the day, it's mostly just to grab your attention. Please forgive me. The idea behind most of my shorts is to give an extremely hot take and then use the remainder of the video, which can't be over 59 seconds, to justify it. I think I did an okay job, but I know I can do better. I talked about the two major faults of the Xbox Series controller being the haptics and the lack of gyro control. The haptics are entirely subjective, but gyro is the main thing that I should have focused on. Frankly, my only concrete justification for that statement is the gyro control, but I'd like to use this opportunity to talk about other stuff as well. I primarily play games on my PC, so I have pretty much any controller available to me at the end of the day. The Xbox Series controller is my favorite, despite its flaws. It's the fact that the controller is nearly perfect that makes it all the more frustrating that it has fallen behind the feature set of other companies' offerings. Today, I would like to do a deep dive on the history of the Xbox controller, how it's evolved over time, and where it falls short. Maybe by the end, I can convince you that the Xbox controller is holding back the entire gaming industry. So, for context on how we got here, let's take a quick look at the Xbox controller's history. When the original Xbox launched in 2001, the controller, called the Duke, was, big. It was divisive, but it set the stage for a design philosophy that prioritized comfort and ergonomics. By the time the Xbox 360 rolled out, Microsoft had refined this philosophy to near perfection. The Xbox controller was an instant classic, widely regarded as not only one of the best controllers of its generation, but one of the best controllers of all time. The asymmetrical analog sticks set a standard, and people still want to argue about that to this day. Just love what you love. It's okay. However, it was not without flaws. The D-pad? Absolute garbage. Using it felt like mashing your thumb through a bowl of mashed potatoes. Yet, despite its shortcomings, the Xbox 360 controller was iconic because it nailed the essentials. It solidified the Xbox controller as the go-to for PC gaming, and that's kind of a problem today. The Xbox One controller, released in 2013, took this winning formula and refined it further. It introduced a significantly better D-pad, still not incredible, but so much better. And it also added what they called impulse triggers, which they were supposed to deliver localized rumble feedback to the triggers specifically to enhance immersion. These triggers excelled in genres like racing games, where players, in theory, should be able to feel the nuances of acceleration and braking. Beyond those standout features, the Xbox One controller also embraced versatility. Had a 3.5mm headphone jack, and the second generation of it did this crazy thing called Bluetooth. I was so excited to have a wireless controller I could use with my PC. That is, without a dedicated dongle. Overall, it wasn't as big of a jump as between the Duke and the Xbox 360 controller, but it established that Microsoft is most interested in refinement. We're not doing touchpads, we're not doing gamepads. All of this laid the groundwork for the Xbox Series controller, a device that polished these concepts to a beautiful shine, but still left glaring gaps in its feature set. These missed opportunities feel all the more frustrating given how close it is to perfection. I still hate calling it the Series controller. I will never stop complaining about that name until Xbox comes out with something that's not named the stupidest thing in the entire world. But this one had the most incremental upgrades out of any other generation. The shape is nearly identical, but they made some subtle changes to the texture. It really makes the older versions feel kinda naked. It also got an upgrade to USB-C, which again makes the previous version feel really dated when you go back to it. The D-pad, the worst part of the 360 controller, has been transformed into a concave dream. It cradles your thumb like the embrace of a long-lost friend, making it a joy to use for platformers or just quick inputs in pretty much any game. Not only is it good compared to previous Xbox generations, it is easily my favorite D-pad from any controller I have ever used. This is fairly subjective, but I cannot gush about this thing enough. I had to look up these last couple, but apparently it introduced a dynamic latency input for smoother gameplay, and I forgot that the share button even exists even though it's right in front of me. I don't use it because PC. Apparently Microsoft even incorporated some recycled plastics into the design, which is always a plus. But overall, these changes are not groundbreaking, but they do further cement the Series controller as a polished, comfortable, and reliable gaming tool. All of this to say, the strength of the Xbox controller has always been refinement. However, Microsoft never takes any risks. For better or for worse, ever since the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube era, Sony and Nintendo have been willing to see what innovations a controller can bring to the gaming experience. Nintendo shaped 2 generations of its consoles around its controllers, while Sony stayed a little too safe with the shape, but did introduce gyroscopes, touchpads, and advanced haptics over the course of several generations. Part of what made the Switch so special is that they refined the features they were experimenting with in previous generations into what, in theory, should be the ultimate controller setup minus analog triggers. The touchpad on the PS5 controller may be useless, but I am proud of Sony for sticking with it. Good job. Being experimental means that companies can take bigger steps forward. People can argue forever about the DualSense controller versus the Series controller, but I have never met someone who prefers the PS4 controller to the DualSense or the Wii U Pro controller to the Switch Pro controller. I'm sure you're out there. Please leave a comment. In my original YouTube short, I spent half the time talking about haptics, and while this is one of the most important parts of a controller to me, it's extremely subjective. Personally, I think the HD rumble and the advanced haptics of the DualSense are quite literally game changers. A lot of people responded that they hate rumble in all of its forms, and that is entirely valid. A lot of pros turn them off, and that makes total sense. If it doesn't please your palms the way it pleases mine, that's okay. As long as you have the option to turn them off, it adds to the experience of the game and doesn't take away from it. For those like myself that find delight in the way that a controller can stimulate your fingies and connect you to the game world, the Xbox controller has fallen behind. I wish Nintendo's HD Rumble was a bit more intense, but I love how precise it is. I think the DualSense has the best of both worlds with detailed feedback that can still shake you to your core. The haptics are so core to the identity of the PS5 controller that they abandoned the DualShock branding they'd been using for generations. As for the Xbox controller, I feel like it varies from one to another, but generally it has intensity, but no nuance. I had completely forgotten that they even added that additional rumble to the triggers. To me, it feels like they never moved beyond the N64 rumble pack in terms of nuance. Microsoft clearly doesn't have any interest in evolving beyond the bare minimum of what technically constitutes haptics. Does this hold back the entire gaming industry? I highly doubt it. The general idea is that developers are more likely to put effort into a feature that will be applicable across all platforms. Why put extra development time into a feature that will only be used by a third or less of the people that play the game? If something is adopted as a standard across all systems, it means that the feature has a much better chance of actually being utilized by third parties. When it comes to haptics, I highly doubt that the work put into utilizing the DualSense controller would be able to be copied over to Nintendo's HD Rumble. I could be wrong on this, but unless all 3 console manufacturers collaborated on a standard that could be used for more advanced haptics across the 3 platforms, I don't think that Microsoft catching up to the others would make much of a difference. I'm still disappointed, but that's my own burden to bear. Gyro is the hill I'm willing to die on. The Wii days gave motion control a bad name in all of its forms. It forced you to use unintuitive movements to do actions that would have been better suited to a button press. Even the gyro on the PS3 controller had some awkward years. As long as you have the option to turn it off, gyroscope functionality is a fantastic addition to almost any game. Nerrel, one of my favorite YouTube channels, has a series of videos that I cannot recommend enough when it comes to this topic. I will link them in the description because if I can't convince you here, he will do a much better job. I'm going to try not to just parrot all of his talking points, but again, watch his videos. I will never do as much justice to this topic as he does. For the most part, I'll be talking about aiming because it objectively benefits, while other applications like steering or tilting are usually novelties, with some exceptions. Even if it's not a shooter, most games have some kind of aiming, and analog sticks suck at it. It's the reason the aim assist is necessary. It's the reason everyone agrees that a mouse and keyboard are superior for shooters. Here's the thing. Gyro isn't here to replace sticks, it's here to augment them, unlocking a level of precision that feels both intuitive and empowering. Gyro controls leverage the motion sensors built into the controller, letting you use natural hand movements to aim or interact with the game world. Combined with analog sticks, it creates a hybrid control scheme where the stick handles broad movements and the gyro refines the details. If you're whipping the controller around, you're doing it wrong. Gyro aim allows a wider field of movement, like a mouse, and is completely frictionless. When combined with an analog stick, it gives you a level of control that doesn't require you to lean on aim assist so the game can try and interpret what you're trying to do, and you're actually taking real control over your input. Games like Splatoon and Breath of the Wild have some of my favorite implementations. Splatoon especially highlights the competitive advantage of Gyro, since it's a shooter made by the company that takes the lead in motion controls, for better or worse. Nintendo is so frustrating because they're the main reason that motion controls have such a negative reputation in the first place. Optional control for aiming your bow? Outstanding! 10 out of 10! Requiring you to flip your controller every which way to complete a puzzle? Why do you do this? Don't even get me started on Mario's stupid hat! Developers across the industry have started to incorporate Gyro into their games. Guerrilla Games added Gyro to Horizon Forbidden West, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart has it, even Ubisoft apparently has it inside Assassin's Creed Valhalla on platforms that support it. And that's the problem. Every platform should support it. Gyro support is becoming more and more common, but it's still not supported by the most popular controller. The best controller, frankly. Developers have limited incentive to support the feature in their games because it's not something that a large portion of their install base even have access to. It should be an entirely ubiquitous feature, but Microsoft has stubbornly planted their heels and denied that there is any reason to include it. I'm not a developer, but it seems pretty straightforward to me that you wouldn't want to remake your control scheme platform by platform. I understand if you have no interest, but it wouldn't take anything away from the controller you already love. Nintendo and Sony have lived through the growing pains of experimentation. We all deserve the chance to enjoy the features that have stood the test of time. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. I think that's limiting. I also think that you don't have to change literally anything about the Xbox controller's shape or reliability or any of the things you love about it. Just add Gyro inside it. There's room. In 2023, there was a leak of a new Xbox controller prototype. It promised rechargeable batteries, advanced haptics, and even gyro control. This was really exciting, but as of now, nothing has come of it. I know they're thinking about it, but they're too cowardly to pull the trigger. The Xbox controller is a masterclass in ergonomics and durability. It's my personal favorite, and I want to make that extremely clear. I don't hate this thing. I'm just disappointed. My child has so much potential, I just want to see him reach it. Microsoft has the resources to lead the charge in controller innovation, but instead, they just play it safe. If you're happy with the Xbox controller as it is, that's great. But if you've ever wondered what gaming could look like if every controller embraced the latest technology, I encourage you to speak up. The industry only moves forward when we demand more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree that the Xbox controller is holding back the entire gaming industry? Or do you think it's perfect as is? I went this entire video without mentioning AA battery.